Captain Veltar stood on the bridge of the Harmony's edge, watching the blue and green planet grow larger on the main screen. He adjusted his pale green robes and smiled with satisfaction. Another primitive world to welcome into the Galactic Council. Another peaceful species to guide into the light of civilization. "Scan complete, Captain," reported his science officer, a tall being with 4 arms and silver skin. "The planet shows signs of a developing civilization. Population approximately 8 billion. Technology level appears basic." Veltar nodded. This would be routine. The Galactic Council had done this thousands of times before. Find a young species, offer them peace and prosperity, and watch them gratefully join the galactic community. No species had ever refused their generous offer. "Prepare the standard first contact message," Veltar ordered. "Tell them we come in peace and wish to welcome them to the greater galaxy." Dr. Lisa Carter was working late in her lab at the Xenobiology Research Center in Colorado when the alarm started blaring. She looked up from her microscope, confused by the piercing sound that echoed through the entire facility. Emergency lights cast red shadows across the walls. "All personnel report to stations immediately," came the announcement over the intercom. "This is not a drill. We have contact." Lisa's heart raced. Contact. The word they had all been waiting for, hoping for, and secretly dreading. She grabbed her lab coat and ran toward the command center, her footsteps echoing in the empty hallways. The command center was buzzing with activity when she arrived. Dozens of technicians sat at computer stations, their faces lit by the glow of monitors showing data streams, radio signals, and satellite images. At the center of it all stood Commander Jake Morrison, a tall man with graying hair and steady eyes that had seen too many battles. "What do we have?" Lisa asked as she approached Jake. "Big ship," Jake said, pointing to the main screen. "Appeared about 10 minutes ago near the moon. They're broadcasting on multiple frequencies." He handed her a tablet with the translation. "They want to talk." Lisa read the message quickly. Her face grew pale as she reached the end. "Jake, they're not asking to talk. They're demanding we surrender." The message was clear and direct. The beings called themselves the Galactic Council. They claimed to represent 12 peaceful species across the galaxy. They offered humanity a choice: join their community willingly and accept their guidance, or be forced to comply for the good of galactic peace. "Peaceful species," Jake muttered, reading over her shoulder. "Right, and I'm sure they'll be very understanding if we say no." Meanwhile, aboard the Harmony's edge, Captain Veltar was growing confused. Most species responded within hours of first contact, usually with excitement and gratitude. The inhabitants of this blue world had been silent for almost a day. "Perhaps they need more time to understand," suggested his communications officer, a being that looked like a cross between a bird and a lizard. "Their technology may be too primitive to properly decode our message." "Send it again," Veltar ordered. "Use simpler language. Make it clear that this is an honor, not a threat." Back on Earth, Jake Morrison was in a meeting with world leaders. Via secure video link, presidents, prime ministers, and generals from every major nation sat in their respective command centers, all focused on the same question: what do we do? "Their technology is clearly superior," said the President of the United States, a woman with sharp eyes and gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. "Their ship is massive, and our satellites can't even get a clear reading on their weapons systems." "Technology doesn't guarantee victory," Jake replied. "We've been preparing for this possibility for 50 years. Operation Deathworld is ready to activate." Operation Deathworld. Asked the British Prime Minister. Lisa Carter stepped forward to explain. "We've studied every possible scenario for first contact. If peaceful negotiation fails, we have contingency. Plans we know something about ourselves that these aliens probably don't." She pulled up a presentation on the main screen. Images of Earth flashed by. Hurricanes, volcanoes, earthquakes, predators, hunting prey, humans climbing mountains, diving into oceans, surviving in deserts and Arctic conditions. Every species we might encounter in space probably evolved on worlds. "Safer than Earth," Lisa continued. "Worlds with stable climates, fewer predators, less extreme conditions. Earth is what we call a death world, and humans are the products of 4 billion years of evolution in hell. The world leaders listened as Lisa explained humanity's unique advantages. Humans could survive temperature ranges that would kill most life forms. They could go without food or water longer than should be possible. They healed from injuries that would be fatal to more fragile species. Most importantly, they had something that peaceful species often lacked: the willingness to fight even when victory seemed impossible. "So what's our answer?" asked the president. Jake Morrison looked at the faces on the screen, then at his own team. "We tell them no." The response was broadcast on all frequencies 6 hours later. Jake Morrison stood in front of a camera, wearing his dress uniform, looking directly into the lens. To the beings calling themselves the Galactic Council, he began, his voice steady and clear. "We have received your message and considered your offer. Our answer is no. Earth is not interested in joining your council or accepting your guidance. We are a free species on a free world, and we intend to remain that way." He paused, letting the words sink in. "We don't want war, but we're not afraid of it either. If you choose to force the issue, you'll discover something about humans that you probably weren't expecting. We're harder to kill than we look." The message was transmitted toward the alien ship and broadcast simultaneously to every nation on Earth. The die was cast aboard the Harmony's Edge. Captain Veltar stared at the screen in shock. In 3,000 years of galactic expansion, no species had ever refused the Council's offer. It was unthinkable. It was unprecedented. It was impossible. "They must not understand," he said finally. "They don't realize what they're rejecting. Send a follow-up message. Explain the benefits of Council membership. Show them images of our peaceful worlds, our advanced technology, our perfect societies." But even as he gave the orders, Veltar felt a chill of uncertainty. The human who had delivered the message didn't look like someone who misunderstood anything. His eyes held something Veltar had never seen before in a first contact situation. Defiance, Dr. Lisa Carter was back in her lab, but she wasn't working on her usual research anymore. Instead, she was compiling everything humanity knew about survival, warfare, and adaptation. If these aliens thought Earth would be an easy conquest, they were about to learn otherwise. She pulled up files on Earth's most dangerous creatures: great white sharks, saltwater crocodiles, polar bears, venomous snakes, disease-carrying insects. Then she looked at files on human history: wars, disasters, exploration of hostile environments. The constant drive to survive and thrive no matter what the universe threw at them. "They have no idea what they're dealing with," she whispered to herself. Outside her window, she could see people going about their daily lives, unaware that their world had just changed forever. Children played in parks, adults went to work, families gathered for dinner. Normal life continuing even as humanity prepared for its greatest challenge. But Lisa knew something the aliens didn't. These ordinary people, living ordinary lives, were the descendants of survivors. Every human alive was the product of an unbroken chain of ancestors who had refused to give up, no matter how impossible the odds. The aliens wanted to meet humanity. They were about to get their wish. 3 days passed after humanity's refusal, and Captain Veltar still could not believe what had happened. He paced back and forth on his bridge, his green robes swishing with each step. No species had ever said no to the Galactic Council. Not once in 3,000 years. "Perhaps they need time to reconsider," suggested his science officer. "Once they realize what they are giving up, they will change their minds." Veltar stopped pacing and looked at the blue planet on his screen. Something about this felt different. The human who had delivered the refusal had not looked confused or scared. He had looked ready for war. "Send a message to Council Prime Zephyros," Veltar ordered. "Tell him we have encountered unexpected resistance. Request instructions." The response came back within hours. Council Prime Zephyros was the leader of all 12 species in the Galactic Council. He was ancient, wise, and had never encountered a problem that could not be solved with patience and superior technology. His message was clear and direct. Send the standard subjugation fleet. Show these humans their proper place in the galaxy. Use minimal force, but make the demonstration clear enough that they would understand their mistake. Admiral, Ben Hayes stood in the command center of the space station, orbiting Earth. He was a career military officer who had spent 15 years preparing for this exact moment. Around him, screens showed the locations of every human ship that could possibly fight in space. The fleet was not impressive. By alien standards, most of the ships were retrofitted military vessels from Earth's various navies. Some were mining ships with weapons bolted onto their hulls. A few were experimental craft that had never been tested in real combat. "Admiral, we have incoming signals." "From deep space," reported Lieutenant Commander Kate Miller. "Multiple ships approaching from the direction of the alien vessel." Ben nodded grimly. He had expected this. The aliens had tried diplomacy first, but now they were bringing force. "How many ships?" 15 confirmed contacts, sir. They'll be here in approximately 18 hours. Ben turned to address his command staff. "Send the activation signal. All ships are to take their assigned positions." Okay, Operation Deathworld is now active. Across the solar system, human ships began moving into position. Most of them were hiding behind asteroids, moons, and space debris. The plan was simple. Let the aliens think they were facing a small, weak defense force, then hit them from every direction at once. Captain Maria Santos commanded the destroyer USS Independence, one of the newest ships in the human fleet. She had served in 3 different Earth navies and had volunteered for this mission. Knowing she might not survive it, her ship was positioned behind one of Jupiter's larger moons, along with 6 other vessels. They would wait until the aliens were focused on Earth, then attack from behind. It was a desperate plan, but desperate was what humans did best. "Captain," reported her weapons officer, "we're receiving the alien fleet composition from long-range sensors. 15 ships all, significantly larger than ours. Energy weapons, particle shields, faster than light drives." Maria smiled grimly. "Sounds like they brought enough ships to handle a normal species. Too bad for them we're not normal." The alien fleet approached Earth's solar system with confidence. Fleet Commander Thrixonol had conducted dozens of subjugation missions over his long career. The pattern was always the same. Arrive with overwhelming force, demand surrender, accept the grateful submission of another primitive species. His ships were beautiful works of art as much as weapons of war. Smooth curves, gleaming metal surfaces, energy weapons that could disable rather than destroy. The Galactic Council preferred to bring species into their community intact, not as smoking ruins. "Commander, we are detecting approximately 8 ships near the 3rd planet," reported his tactical officer. "They appear to be primitive chemical rocket designs with basic weapons." Thrixonol looked at the tactical display with satisfaction. 8 ships against 15. Primitive technology against advanced energy systems. This would be over quickly. "Open a communication channel to the planet," he ordered. "Tell them this is their final chance to surrender peacefully." The message was transmitted to Earth, but no response came back. Instead, the 8 human ships began moving toward the alien fleet. Admiral Ben Hayes watched the tactical display from his command station. The alien ships were exactly where intelligence had predicted they would be, grouped together in a standard defensive formation, confident in their superior numbers and technology. "All hidden units, prepare for attack run," he transmitted on the coded frequency. "Wait for my signal." The first battle began when the 8 visible human ships opened fire. With conventional missiles and railgun rounds, Alayan shields absorbed the impacts easily, just as expected. The aliens returned fire with their energy weapons. It's designed to disable the human ships without destroying them completely. But something unexpected happened. When the first human ship was hit and began losing power, it did not retreat or surrender. Instead, it accelerated directly toward the nearest alien vessel. Fleet Commander Thrixonol watched in shock as the damaged human ship rammed into one of his cruisers. The explosion destroyed both vessels instantly. "What are they doing?" he demanded. "Why did they destroy themselves?" Before anyone could answer, 2 more human ships followed the same pattern. When their weapons proved ineffective, they used their ships as weapons themselves. "All ships, maintain formation," Thrixonol ordered, trying to stay calm. "These creatures are insane, but they cannot ram all of us." That was when Admiral Ben Hayes gave the signal he had been waiting for. Ow. Units, attack now. From behind asteroids, moons, and space debris, 25 more human ships appeared. They had been hiding in the shadow zones where alien sensors could not detect them. Waiting for the perfect moment to strike, the aliens suddenly found themselves surrounded. Ships attacked from above, below, and from all sides. The human vessels were smaller and less advanced, but they fought like nothing the aliens had ever encountered. Captain Maria Santos brought her ship out from behind. Jupiter's moon at full speed. Her target was the alien command ship, easily identified by its size and position in the center of the formation. All weapons, target their engines, she ordered. We don't need to destroy them. We just need to disable them. Independence fired everything it had at the alien flagship. Missiles, railgun rounds, and even mining charges stolen from asteroid operations. Most of the shots were absorbed by the alien shields, but a few got through. The alien ship shuddered under the impact, its smooth hull scarred by human weapons. For the first time in the battle, Fleet Commander Thrixonal felt something he had never experienced before: fear. Return fire on that ship, he ordered. Destroy it completely. The alien energy weapons lanced out toward the Independence, but Captain Santos was already moving. Her ship twisted and rolled through space, using maneuvers that would have been impossible for the larger alien vessels. Captain, we've lost main power, reported her engineer. Engines are failing. Maria looked at the tactical display. Her ship was dying, but the alien flagship was directly ahead. She could see the bridge through the main viewing windows, could see the alien commander staring back at her. All hands, prepare for impact, she announced over the ship's intercom. It's been an honor serving with you. The Independence slammed into the alien flagship at full speed. The explosion lit up space for thousands of miles in every direction. Both ships were completely destroyed. But something else happened in that moment. Captain Santos had broadcast her final message on all frequencies, and every human ship heard it. Remember, they chose to come to our neighborhood. The words spread through the human fleet like wildfire. Suddenly, every human captain understood exactly what they were fighting for. This was not just a battle for Earth. This was a battle for the right to exist as free beings in their own solar system. The tide of battle began to turn. Human ships that should have been destroyed kept fighting. Crews that should have surrendered kept finding new ways to hurt the enemy. When their weapons failed, they used their ships. When their ships failed, they used debris from destroyed vessels as projectiles. Fleet Commander Thrixonal watched his perfect formation fall apart. 3 of his ships had been destroyed by ramming attacks. 2 more were disabled and drifting helplessly. The remaining human vessels continued to attack with a fury that made no tactical sense. Commander, we should retreat, suggested his tactical officer. These creatures fight like demons, show no regard for their own lives. Thrixonal stared at the battle display, trying to understand what was happening. In all his years of service, he had never encountered anything like this. Species were supposed to surrender when faced with superior force. They were supposed to value their lives more than abstract concepts like freedom. But these humans seemed to prefer death to surrender. They fought as if losing the battle would be worse than dying. They treated their own deaths as acceptable losses, if it meant hurting the enemy. Send a message to all ships, Thrixonal ordered reluctantly. Begin withdrawal to minimum safe distance. We need to reassess the situation. As the alien fleet pulled back, the remaining human ships did not pursue. They had lost more than half their number, but they had accomplished something impossible. News of the battle near Earth spread through the galaxy faster than anyone had expected. For the first time in 3,000 years, a galactic council fleet had been forced to retreat. Species that had served the council for generations whispered about the impossible thing that had happened. Council Prime Zephrose sat in his crystal throne on the capital world of Zenthari Prime, reading battle reports that made no sense. How could primitive chemical rockets defeat energy weapons? How could a species choose death over surrender? Send for the xenopsychology experts, he ordered his aide. I need to understand what we are dealing with. Dr. Kethmiran was the galaxy's leading expert on alien psychology. She had studied hundreds of species and helped integrate them all into the council. When she arrived at the capital, she brought disturbing news. "Prime, I have analyzed the human broadcasts and behavioral patterns," she reported. "These beings are unlike anything we have encountered. They evolved in what can only be described as a death world." She activated a holographic display showing Earth's most dangerous environments. Hurricanes, volcanoes, earthquakes, predators that could kill with a single bite. "Most species we contact evolved in safe environments," Dr. Kethmiran continued. "Stable climates, few predators, abundant resources. Humans evolved in constant danger. They are by definition apex predators." Zephyros studied the images with growing concern. "But surely their primitive technology makes them manageable." "That is where we made our error, Prime. We assume technology determines victory, but humans do not fight with technology alone. They fight with something we have forgotten how to use, which is desperation. It's the willingness to die rather than submit. They call it honor, freedom, or courage. Whatever the name, it makes them incredibly dangerous." While the council debated what to do about Earth, Colonel Rick Stone was preparing. For humanity's first offensive operation, intelligence had located a small council research station in a nearby star system. It was lightly defended and contained valuable information about alien technology. Rick stood before his team of 30 volunteers in the cargo bay of a captured alien transport ship. They had taken the vessel during the space battle and learned to operate its basic systems. "This is a reconnaissance mission," Rick told his troops. "We go in, gather intelligence, and get out. But if something goes wrong, remember what Captain Santos taught us. We make them pay for every inch." The team was equipped with standard Earth military gear: assault rifles, explosives, body armor, and communications equipment. Nothing fancy, but they knew how to use it effectively. Lieutenant Amy Foster raised her hand. "Colonel, what if we encounter civilians?" "The Council doesn't have civilians the way we understand them," Rick replied. "Everyone on that station chose to serve an empire that demands our surrender. They made their choice. The captured alien ship approached the research station without being challenged. Its identification codes were still valid. The station's security was designed to keep threats out, not to monitor ships that were already approved for docking." Dr. Ytholin was working late in his laboratory when the docking alarms chimed. He looked up from his research on primitive weapon systems, annoyed by the interruption. No supply ships were scheduled to arrive for another week. He walked to the observation window and saw a familiar transport ship connecting to the station's main airlock. Perhaps it was bringing new specimens for his research on Deathworld species. Airlocks cycled open, and 30 humans in military gear poured into the station. They moved quickly and silently through corridors designed for much larger alien bodies. Their smaller size allowed them to use maintenance passages and ventilation systems that the aliens had never considered as potential routes. The first alien Dr. Ytholin encountered was a tall, gray-skinned being working at a computer terminal. The creature looked up in surprise as Rick Stone appeared beside him like a ghost. "Hello," Rick said politely, pointing his rifle at the alien's head. "We're here to borrow some information." Within 10 minutes, the humans had secured the entire station. The alien crew of 45 beings found themselves prisoners in their own facility, facing creatures they had only heard about in confused battle reports. Dr. Ytholin stared at the human soldiers with scientific fascination mixed with terror. These beings were smaller than most galactic species, but they moved with the fluid grace of natural predators. Their eyes tracked movement constantly, and they seemed to see threats that were not even there. "You are the humans," he said to Colonel Stone. "The species that defeated Fleet Commander Thrixonal." "That's right," Rick replied. "And you're going to help us understand your technology?" "I will not betray the Council," Dr. Ytholin said, trying to sound braver than he felt. Rick smiled, but it was not a friendly expression. "Doctor, let me explain something about humans. We're very good at getting information from people who don't want to give it to us. We've had thousands of years of practice." Amy Foster was working at the station's main computer terminal, downloading everything she could access. The alien data systems were more advanced than Earth's technology, but humans had always been good at figuring out how things worked. "Colonel, I'm getting files on something called the pacification protocol, she reported. It looks like a step-by-step guide for conquering primitive species. Rick walked over to look at the screen. The files showed the Council's standard approach. 2 new worlds, arrive with overwhelming force, demand surrender, integrate the population into their empire. It had worked perfectly for 3,000 years. Download everything, Rick ordered. I want to know how they've been doing this to other species. But the most disturbing discovery came when Amy accessed the genetic research files. Dr. Yatholin had been studying biological samples from dozens of species, looking for ways to make them more compliant and less aggressive. Rick, you need to see this, Amy called out. They've been experimenting on other species, changing their DNA to make them more obedient. The files showed generations of genetic modification designed to remove what the Council called antisocial traits. Aggression, independence, curiosity, and the desire for freedom had all been gradually bred out of conquered species. They're not just conquering worlds, Rick said quietly. They're stealing what makes species unique, returning everyone into sheep. Double quotes. Dr. Yatholin overheard the conversation and spoke up. It is for the greater good. Peace requires sacrifice. Individual desires must be subordinated to collective harmony. Rick turned to face the alien scientist. Doctor, let me tell you about human history. Every time someone tried to create perfect peace by destroying freedom, it ended in horror. We fought wars against our own species to prevent exactly what you're describing. The data download was complete, but Rick made one more decision. Instead of simply leaving with the information, he ordered his team to plant explosive charges. Throughout the station's research levels, Colonel, the mission was reconnaissance only, Amy reminded him. The mission changed when we learned what they're really doing, Rick replied. This research dies here. As the humans prepared to leave, Dr. Yatholin made a desperate plea. You are destroying years of scientific progress. This research could benefit the entire galaxy. Rick stopped at the airlock and looked back at the alien scientist. Doctor, there are some things more important than progress. Freedom is one of them. The right to be yourself, even if yourself is imperfect, is another. The humans departed in their captured ship, leaving the research station intact, but knowing it would not remain that way for long. 30 minutes after they reached safe distance, the explosives detonated. The station's research levels were completely destroyed. Along with thousands of files on genetic modification and pacification techniques, the destruction of the research station sent shockwaves through the Galactic Council. Not only had humans successfully conducted an offensive operation against a secured facility, but they had shown something even more disturbing. They were willing to destroy valuable knowledge. They believed it was being used for evil purposes. Council. Prime Zephyros called an emergency session of all 12 species representatives. The crystal chamber filled with beings of different shapes and sizes, all united by their growing concern about the human threat. The humans have demonstrated capabilities we did not anticipate, Zephyros announced. They infiltrated a secure facility using captured technology. They extracted classified information, and they destroyed irreplaceable research data. The representative from the Keltharian Empire, a species that looked like giant insects, spoke first. Prime, perhaps we should reconsider our approach. These humans seem different from other species. Different how? Asked the representative. From the Morvani Federation, they appear to value abstract concepts over their own survival. They choose death over submission. They destroy valuable resources rather than allow them to be used for purposes they disagree with. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Galactic Council had never encountered a species that operated on such principles. Every other race in the galaxy understood that survival and prosperity were the highest goals. Humans seemed to believe that some things were more important than life itself. What do our psychological profiles suggest? Zephyros asked. 6 months after the destruction of the research station, the war had spread to 12 different star systems. What started as a simple subjugation mission had become the largest conflict the galaxy had seen in 3,000 years. General Paul, Carter stood on the bridge of the human flagship Retribution, looking at star charts that showed the locations of ongoing battles. Each red dot represented a world where species were fighting for their freedom, inspired by humanity's example. "General, we're receiving surrender requests from 3 more Council worlds," reported Captain Helen Morris. "The Vorthok system wants protection from Council reinforcements. The Zelani colonies are requesting human military advisors. The Kresh homeworld is asking for weapon shipments." Paul nodded with satisfaction. The rebellion was spreading, faster than anyone had predicted. Species that had served the Council for generations were suddenly remembering what it felt like to be free. "Send confirmation to all 3 requests," Paul ordered, "and prepare Task Force 7 for departure. We're going to liberate the slave processing facility at Gorvani Station." The slave processing facility was one of the Council's most closely guarded secrets. New species were brought there to begin genetic modification treatments designed to make them more obedient. It was heavily defended by ships from 4 different Council species, but Paul had learned something important about Council military tactics during the past 6 months. They were designed to fight other Council species who followed predictable patterns and honored certain rules of engagement. They were not designed to fight humans who ignored all conventional military wisdom. Captain Helen Morris commanded the assault fleet that approached Gorvani Station. Her ships looked like a collection of salvaged junk compared to the sleek Council vessels defending the facility. But appearances could be deceiving. "Council fleet is moving to intercept," reported her tactical officer. 15 ships in standard defensive formation. They're requesting our surrender." Helen smiled grimly. "Send them our standard reply." The reply was a recording of Captain Santos' final words. "Remember, they chose to come to our neighborhood." It had become humanity's unofficial battle cry. It never failed to confuse Council commanders. The battle began exactly as the Council expected. Human ships attacked in small groups using primitive weapons against advanced energy shields. Council commanders had seen this pattern before and knew how to respond, but then something unexpected happened. The human ships that were supposedly destroyed by Council energy weapons suddenly reappeared behind the defensive formation. They had been using false distress signals and fake explosion effects to make the aliens think they were out of the fight. "All ships, implement Deception Protocol 7, Helen ordered over the secure channel. Suddenly, half the human fleet seemed to disappear from the Council's sensors. The ships were still there, but they were using electronic countermeasures developed specifically to confuse alien detection systems. The Council fleet found itself fighting an enemy they could not see, count, or predict. Ships appeared from impossible directions, attacked with weapons that should not have been effective, and vanished before return fire could hit them. Commander Zelthmer of the Council Defense Fleet watched his perfect formation fall apart in confusion. His ships were firing at shadows while real human vessels attacked from blind spots. His advanced tactical computers could not process an enemy that refused to follow logical patterns. "How many human ships are there?" he demanded. "Unknown, sir," replied his sensor operator. "Our count keeps changing. They appear to be using some form of holographic deception." What the alien did not understand was that humans had been using deception in warfare for thousands of years. They knew how to make small forces look large, how to make attacks from the east while the enemy watched the west, and how to turn an opponent's advantages against them. While the space battle raged around Gorvani Station, Colonel Rick Stone was leading a boarding assault on the facility itself. His team of 40 volunteers had trained specifically for fighting inside alien structures designed for much larger beings. The humans moved through the station like ghosts, using ventilation systems, maintenance shafts, and emergency passages that the aliens had never considered as potential attack routes. They appeared in corridors that should have been secure, struck quickly, vanished before reinforcements could arrive. Security Chief Exthera had never experienced anything like it. His forces were designed to prevent escapes by captive species, not to repel invasion by creatures that seemed to be everywhere at once. "Seal all maintenance areas," he ordered. "Cut power to the ventilation systems. Flood the secondary passages with security gas." But the humans had prepared for those countermeasures. They wore sealed breathing apparatus and carried portable power sources. More importantly, They had studied the station's layout and knew how to disable its security systems from the inside. Rick Stone reached the facility's main detention center, where thousands of beings from dozens of species were being held for genetic modification. The sight that greeted him filled him with cold rage. Creatures that had once been proud. Predators had been turned into docile herbivores. Species that had been independent explorers had been modified to be afraid of leaving their home territories. Intelligent beings had been reduced to the mental capacity of children. "Get the medical team down here," Rick ordered over his radio. "We need to document everything before we destroy this place." Dr. Lisa Carter arrived with a team of human scientists and began examining the genetic modification equipment. What they found was worse than anyone had imagined. "Rick, they're not just changing behavior," Lisa reported. "They're changing the fundamental nature of these species. They're removing the genes responsible for curiosity, aggression, independence, and creative thinking. Can it be reversed? Maybe for the recent cases, but some of these modifications go back generations. They've stolen the souls of entire civilizations. The rescue operation took 6 hours. Human ships evacuated over 8,000 prisoners, while the boarding teams systematically destroyed every piece of genetic modification equipment they could find. By the time they were finished, Gorvani's station was a burning wreck. But the most important part of the mission was not the physical destruction. It was what the rescued prisoners would tell other species about what the Council had been doing to them. News of the Gorvani liberation spread through the galaxy like wildfire. Species that had been loyal to the Council for generations began to question what they had given up in exchange for peace and security. On the Council capital world of Zenthari Prime, emergency sessions were being held around the clock. Council Prime Zephyros faced the growing realization that his perfect galactic order was falling apart. "The rebellion has spread to 47 systems," reported his military advisor. "We have lost contact with 6 different sectors, and worst of all, our own member species are beginning to question our authority." The representative from the Keltharian Empire stood to address the assembly. "Prime, my people are asking difficult questions. They want to know why we never told them about the genetic modification programs. They want to know what else we have hidden from them." Other representatives nodded in agreement. The careful balance of fear and respect that had held the Council together for millennia was crumbling. "What do our psychological experts recommend?" Zephyros asked. Dr. Kethmaron stood with obvious reluctance. "Prime, the humans have introduced something into the galaxy that we cannot control or contain. They have given other species something that we spent thousands of years eliminating, which is hope, the belief that change is possible. The idea that they do not have to accept the way things are, simply because that is how they have always been." The chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. The Council had maintained control by convincing everyone that their system was the only way to achieve peace and prosperity. Humans had proven that alternatives existed. They are teaching other species to be like them, Dr. Kethmiron continued. Independent, curious, willing to fight for their beliefs. Every world they liberate becomes a center of new rebellion. On the liberated world of Kresh Prime, something unprecedented was happening. Kresh people who had been peaceful farmers for 2,000 years were volunteering for military service alongside human advisors. Lieutenant Amy Foster watched a group of young Kresh learning to use human weapons and tactics. They were awkward at first, their peaceful nature making it difficult for them to embrace conflict. But they were learning. "Why do you want to fight?" Amy asked one of the volunteers. A female Kresh named Salandra, because the humans showed us something we had forgotten, Salandra replied. "They showed us that some things are worth fighting for. That freedom has value. That being alive is not the same as truly living." Amy nodded with understanding. This was happening on dozens of worlds across the galaxy. Species were rediscovering parts of themselves that had been buried under generations of Council control. Back in Council space, the psychological warfare was having devastating effects. Admiral Thrixonal, who had commanded the first failed attack on Earth, was struggling with his own doubts about the Council's methods. 2 years after the first battle near Earth, the war came to an end, not with explosions and destruction, but with a simple message broadcast across the entire galaxy. Council Prime Zephyros stood before the emergency assembly on Zenthari Prime, his ancient face showing the weight of defeat. The Galactic Council hereby offers unconditional surrender to the human-led alliance. He announced to a chamber filled with shocked representatives, "We request immediate negotiations for a peaceful transition of power." The surrender had become inevitable when 3 of the Council's founding member species declared independence and joined the rebellion. The perfect order that had lasted 3,000 years had crumbled in less than 24 months. President Alex Turner sat in the Oval Office in Washington, D.C., reading the surrender message that had just arrived from deep space. Around him, his closest advisors tried to process what had happened. Humanity had gone from an unknown species to the leaders of a galactic revolution. "Madam President, representatives from over 200 species are requesting to meet with us," reported Secretary of State Jennifer Walsh. "They want to discuss forming a new galactic government." Alex looked out the window at the ordinary street where ordinary people were going about their daily lives. Children walked to school, adults headed to work, families prepared for another normal day. None of them fully understood that their species had just become the most influential force in the galaxy. "Schedule the meetings," Alex decided. "But make it clear that we're not interested in ruling anyone. We fought for freedom, not empire." The first Galactic Assembly meeting was held on a neutral space station at the edge of former Council territory. Representatives from species across the galaxy gathered to decide what would replace the old order. General Paul Carter represented Earth's military interests at the assembly. As he entered the main conference chamber, he was struck by the diversity of beings present. Some looked almost human, others were completely alien. But all of them shared something new: the look of people who had chosen their own path. The Kresh representative, Salandra, stood to address the assembly. She had been one of the first aliens to train with human military advisors, and her people had become some of the most effective freedom fighters in the galaxy. "We gather today not as subjects but as equals," she announced. "The humans have shown us that strength comes not from control, but from choice. They taught us that a galaxy built on fear cannot last, but one built on hope can endure forever." The applause that followed came from beings who had never been allowed to make noise in the old council chambers. The sound filled the station with something that had been missing from galactic politics for millennia: genuine enthusiasm. Dr. Lisa Carter had been appointed as Earth's chief science advisor for the transition government. Her job was to help coordinate the massive effort of undoing 3,000 years of genetic modification and cultural suppression. She stood before a committee of scientists from dozens of species, all working together to solve problems that the Council had created. "Our goal is not to return species to their original state," she explained. "That's impossible after so many generations. Instead, we want to give them the choice of who they want to become." The work was incredibly complex. Some species had been modified so extensively that reversing the changes completely would kill them. Others had forgotten their original cultures so thoroughly that reconstruction was impossible. But something remarkable was happening throughout the galaxy. Species were not just trying to return to their past selves. They were using their newfound freedom to become something entirely new. The Vorthok, who had been peaceful traders for 2,000 years, discovered that their ancestors had been explorers and inventors. Within months of liberation, they were building new types of spacecraft and planning expeditions to unexplored regions of space. The Morvani Federation, which had been loyal council bureaucrats, rediscovered their people's love of art and music. Their worlds suddenly burst with creativity that had been suppressed for generations. Even more surprising, many species asked for Earth animals and plants to be introduced to their worlds. They wanted the challenge, the unpredictability, the life force that came with real ecosystems instead of the sterile perfection of council worlds. Commander Jake Morrison, now retired from active military service, found himself serving as an advisor to newly independent worlds. He visited a former council paradise planet that had requested what they called Earth modifications. The world had once been perfectly controlled: stable weather, no dangerous animals, abundant food sources, and completely predictable conditions. Now, It was being transformed into something more challenging and more alive. Why would you want predators on your world? Jake asked the planetary governor, a being that looked like a tall, thin human with blue skin. Because predators create stronger prey, the governor replied. Because challenges create growth, because safety without purpose is just another form of death. Jake watched as Earth wolves were released into forests that had never known real hunters. He saw alien children learning to climb trees that might have dangerous animals hiding in them. He witnessed an entire civilization choosing difficulty over ease. Captain Helen Morris commanded one of the exploration fleets that were pushing into previously unknown regions of space. The new Galactic Alliance was not content to simply reorganize what the Council had controlled. They wanted to discover what lay beyond the boundaries of known space. Her ship, the New Horizons, carried a mixed crew of humans and aliens working together. The combination was proving incredibly effective. Humans brought their natural curiosity and willingness to take risks, while other species contributed their advanced technology and different perspectives. Captain, we're detecting a signal from an unexplored system, reported her science officer, a Zalani female named Takara. It appears to be artificial, but not from any known species. Helen smiled with the same expression that had driven humans to cross oceans, climb mountains, and reach for the stars. Set course for the signal. Let's see what's out there. So was happening throughout the galaxy. Ships with mixed crews were exploring regions that the Council had declared too dangerous or irrelevant. They were making contact with species that had hidden from galactic civilization for thousands of years. They were discovering wonders that had been ignored in favor of safe, predictable expansion. Back on Earth, the changes were just as dramatic, but in different ways. Humanity had gone from being an isolated species on a single world to being connected with hundreds of other civilizations. New technologies, new ideas, and new possibilities arrived daily. Dr. Lisa Carter stood in her laboratory, which now included equipment and specimens from dozens of different worlds. She was working on a project that would have been impossible. Under the old Council system, creating new life forms that combined the best traits of multiple species. "Lisa, you need to see this," called her assistant, Dr. Kevin Brooks. He was examining a plant specimen that had been developed on a liberated world using both Earth and alien genetic material. The plant was beautiful in a way that defied description. It had the resilience of Earth vegetation, but the luminescent properties of plants from the crystal worlds of the former Council. It was something entirely new, created by minds that were free to imagine possibilities beyond what had existed before. "It's working," Lisa said quietly. "The galaxy is becoming something it never could have been under the Council." The transformation was not just biological or technological. It was philosophical. Species throughout the galaxy were rediscovering concepts that had been suppressed for millennia. Curiosity, ambition, the desire to create rather than simply maintain. Admiral Ben Hayes, now in his 70s, sat in a garden on Earth that contained plants from 50 different worlds. He was writing his memoirs, trying to capture what had happened during the war and its aftermath. "The Council thought they were creating peace," he wrote, "but they were actually creating stagnation. Real peace comes not from the absence of conflict, but from the presence of choice. When people can choose their own path, they fight less because they are too busy building." The memorial service for Captain Maria Santos was held on the anniversary of her sacrifice during the first space battle. Representatives from every species in the new alliance attended, filling a space station near Earth with beings who would never have met under the old system. President Alex Turner gave the memorial address, speaking to an audience that represented the most diverse gathering in galactic history. "Maria Santos died fighting for humanity's freedom," Alex said. "But her sacrifice gave birth to something much larger. She died so that every being in this galaxy could have the right to choose their own destiny." The applause that followed was not just for one human hero, but for the idea she had died defending, that freedom was worth any price, and that no one had the right to decide another's fate. As the ceremony ended, Jake Morrison stood watching, Ships depart for destinations throughout the galaxy. Human ships, alien ships, mixed crews, all heading toward their own chosen futures. The galaxy had learned humanity's greatest lesson. The most dangerous worlds create the most extraordinary life. But they had also learned something else.